In Long Beach, it all comes down to what you look like. It's all about color. If you're Latino or Asian or black, you could get blasted anytime you walk out your door.
My name is Erin Gruwell.
Schools are divided into separate tribes.
I'm not sitting near him.
I can't go back there alone.
Man, I know you ain't talking to me.
We kill each other over race, pride, and respect. We fight for our America.
What you're saying is, if the Latinos weren't here, or the Cambodians, or the blacks, or the whites, or whoever they are, if they weren't here, everything would be better for you.
Lady, stop acting like you're trying to understand our situation.
Why don't you explain it to me?
We in a war.
You're a first-time teacher. You can't make someone want an education. Listen to me, all of you.
Stand on the line if you've lost a friend to gang violence. Stand on the line if you've lost more than one friend. 3, 4 or more.
From this moment on, the person you were, that person's turn is over.
Everyone has their own story. We're gonna write in these journals.
There's no place like this out there for us. I can't go back to the way it used to be.
Need you. Nah, man, I can't.
Nobody listens to a teenager, and they don't see the wars we fight every day. I don't even know how this war started. She told us we had something to say to people.
That's a pretty dramatic introduction. So without further ado, welcome my friend, my colleague, Erin Gruwell. Erin, great to see you.
Great to see you and know that there's all of your colleagues joining us from every corner of the globe.
Yes, we have a great following here. They're excited to participate in this forum. We're going to offer lots of questions and answers. But before we do all that, I want to share with them how you and I got together and why we think it's important for us to share our messages with them today. So Erin, I met by reading her book, The Freedom Writer's Diary, that of her and her 150 students. And as I was reading the book, there was a passage that came to my attention. I'm reading it and I just stopped dead in my tracks. And the phrase was that she wrote that all her students seemed to know every 4-letter word except the word hope. And when I read that, it just stopped me again dead in my tracks. And I said, someday, somehow, somewhere, I need to meet this woman because we share a common mission and a common understanding. Without that word hope, nothing else seems to work well. Fortunately, as time has it and the universe gives us answers and opportunities, Erin and I and our mutual good friend Antoine Fisher were all booked to share our stories and our information and our insights with the Anne Arundel public school system in Annapolis, Maryland, And can you imagine a lineup of Erin and Antoine, and then I got to tag along on that. And we decided then and there that we would find additional opportunities to connect. Our next opportunity was Erin and I spoke at the New York City Police Department, NYPD, first police plaza, just like from Law and Order. And we spoke to 500 officers, including the police commissioner, his deputy commissioner, all the chiefs, and certainly the rank and file, and shared a message of hope to them because they're on the front lines every day. And we thought it was important for them to understand not only our respect and appreciation, but equal to that, to understand how we try to make a difference collectively in the lives of kids we serve, particularly those young people where it's so easy to give up on them. We then worked in Manitowoc, Wisconsin on a joint project. We've done a podcast. Erin produces a podcast, Freedom Writers Podcast, that if you're not on her list or have that app, you should in fact do that. That will bring hope to you every time she has a special guest that she interviews. Antoine and I were two of those special guests, and we appreciate it, and that helped us get our message across the world. Erin was the dean of our Masters Institute a few years ago, where we got to honor her and her work and spend some more time with her. And then we've just developed this remarkable friendship that allows us to fill each other's buckets. There are times when we're slowing our lives down, and there are times when we need others to lift us up, and we look to each other where we share common values and common goals. And Erin's become one of those dear and sweet friends for me and for the work that we do with Kids at Hope. So there's lots of titles for Erin Gruwell. There's lots of accolades for Erin Gruwell, but the most important one is the one that she is most proud of, and that is she's a teacher. And Erin, again, welcome. It's good to have a teacher with us today. There's lots of teachers watching. And so I'm going to start this conversation about hope with different definitions of hope. So I'm going to share a couple of different definitions, and then I want you to share your definition of hope, right? So a good friend of mine who studied hope, he passed away a few years ago, defined hope as knowing that tomorrow will be better than today, and you have the power to make it so. And boy, again, that understanding of what hope is extremely important today. Another definition of hope is knowing that you have goals, pathways, and agency necessary to move from point A to point B, that you can control your own destiny in doing so. So the idea of hope is to have goals, know you're at point A, you want to be at point B. Pathways, you know a way to get there, even if the first pathway is blocked, and that you're willing to put gas in your own gas tank. And of course, Kids at Hope's definition of goals, of hope, is knowing that you have 4 destinations that life is going to take you on a path towards: home and family, education, career, community service, hobbies, and recreation. And that you should have an image of what contributions you want to make in those 4 destinations. Once you figure that out, you come back to the present, and then you prepare for the journey that you already imagined in your mind's eye. So those are some common definitions to help us better understand hope. But again, you've lived through this in your own life with your students. What is Erin Gruwell's definition of hope?
It's a great question. I would hope in these trying times that hope spreads faster than this virus. I think that right now, hope for me is the light in dark places, and that could be internally or externally. But I am still very much a teacher, and my classroom, like so many teachers on this call, has had to move from being the sage on the stage to the guide on the side, pushing buttons in our virtual classroom. And so I really commiserate with all of the teachers, all of my brethren out there who are trying to figure out, for the most vulnerable among us, how can we be their hope? How can we be their hope while they're at home? And how can we be their light in this darkness?
So that played out very dramatically in your life and your relationships with your students. So you came in as a freshman teacher. You came from pretty much a life of privilege. You're now in an inner city high school, and they have assigned you freshman English students, 4 sections or 5 sections, 150 students, where hope was not part of their understanding of what opportunities exist in the world. So that was kind of a clash of the cultures, right? From what you always felt that you can control your own destiny, get a good education, get a good job, and now you're faced with 150 students that was not part of what they understood. So how did you teach hope to them? What steps did you take to make that understanding part of who they needed to be?
That's a great question. I think that if I could mirror then to now, we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of our book, which is surreal. But looking back at that beginning, it wasn't that we were just in an urban community. It was a community that had just had the Los Angeles riots. We had had 126 homicides in a single year. So my students, who were teenagers, did not have hope. You know, they felt like they had a bullseye on their chest. They looked over their shoulder and wondered, am I next? Am I that next statistic, that data that may be shot and subsequently 6 feet under? And so then, as in now, my students had to realize that they could be a phoenix rising from the ashes. I hope students now can also realize that they too can be a phoenix that rises. But at that time, what I needed to do was find education that was real, that was relevant, and that was relationship driven, that spoke to them, because they had felt marginalized and invisible and like they were the other for so long, that I wanted my classroom to be this place of hope.
So we would have identified those students in a different era, and unfortunately maybe still a little bit today, but we would have identified those students as at-risk students.
Absolutely.
And as soon as we place that.
I'm glad you said that, because I think that in our profession, oftentimes we try to come up with words to demarcate and differentiate, and those words can be very hurtful for students, even though educators have the best of intentions. You know, for students who were identified as special ed, they felt anything but special. For those kids that were in remedial English, my students said, well, that's like the nickname for the dumb class. So when we named our kids at Hope, we're already putting that black cloud over their head. We're already making them mired down or anchored with that negativity, handicap rather than handy capable. So the tragedy was, I didn't understand all that verbiage. I was just excited to teach after a riot, and the smoke had cleared. And what I found was the ash. What I found was the residual smoke still lingering of the negativity. And I'm so honored by you realizing that at risk should be changed to at hope. And that's why I'm so madly in love with you and your organization, because it is that pedagogical shift that allows us to identify our kids in a different way. But
you must have been overwhelmed, you know, again, coming from the culture and upbringing that you had to the inner city of Woodrow Wilson High School, and faced with students who others had so easily given up on. Yeah. And one of the first tenets of Kids Hope is that you have to believe that all kids are capable of success, no exceptions. You just have to believe that. As a matter of fact, if we ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, do you believe all kids are capable of success, no exceptions? 1 meaning you strongly disbelieve in that statement, 10 meaning you strongly believe. We say you have to circle a 10 because kids need 10s in their lives. They don't need people who don't believe in them. But here's my question. Okay. These kids have given you every reason not to believe in them. And they've given all the administrators at Woodrow Wilson High School reasons not to believe in them. They've given sometimes the community, the cops, and others reasons not to believe in them because of their behavior, not because of who they are, but because of their behavior. Why did you believe in them? If again, every suggestion out there is that these kids aren't worthy of you to believe in them because they've shown it in their own lives. Why did you decide to believe in them? Well, maybe it was serendipity that we met, because I didn't know that I was practicing the at hope mantra of no exceptions. I just knew I had 150 kids. And before the diatribe of school to prison pipeline, my kids were already immersed in that pipeline. My 150 kids had already been arrested, had ankle monitors on their legs in my classroom, had probation officers who dropped them off, had records and rap sheets. So that prison to pipeline, school to prison pipeline was very real. When I went to the teacher's lounge, I heard terms that were toxic.
those kids and them. I heard banter about discarding and disregarding kids and just getting rid of them. And I made an agreement to myself that I wasn't going to send a single kid away. I wasn't going to send them out of my class to the principal, to the superintendent, to be suspended or expelled. And I'm so proud that I kept that oath to myself. Not a single student was ever sent away. And the reason being is I wanted them to realize that in this messy, chaotic classroom, room 203, that if I send you away, you're not going to get all this rich material. And hopefully education is going to equalize a very unfair playing field, which is the world that you know. So we're going to create a world of our own that is inclusive and accepting, and that you can fall, but when you fall, you can fall forward. So like you with Kids at Hope, it was very experimental, but we led with love. And for a lot of kids, they weren't used to somebody leading with love. So of course they pushed me away, or they pushed those problems down, and I just had to be relentless. I had to show up every day, even when it was difficult, even when I was fighting back tears, even when I was insecure and had an imposter complex. I had to show those kids, no exception, that I believed in them.
And what a powerful gift of all the gifts that we can give to each other. One of the more powerful gifts is this, to believe in each other, to believe regardless of who you are. You know, there are people in your life that care about you and are there for you. I have a few more questions before I get there, because I want to explore and dig a little bit deeper into that experience, because again, it's an experience of believing that if I work hard enough, that if I have a pathway and I have a goal to connect to these young people, and I have a pathway to get there, and you came up with multiple pathways, and that I'm going to put gas in my own gas tank every single day, that I'm going to come in with energy and expectation and anticipation that tomorrow will be better than today, and I have the power to make it so. One of those great classic definitions of hope. But we also know in today, in our audience out there, in virtual bandwidth land, that there are some young people in our probation system or our detention system who have made some serious choices, sometimes bad choices, and now they're in a system that is trying to help them, guide them to some better choices. Some of those young people were in your classroom, and some of them were wondering if you were the imposter, another adult who just had a duty to perform, but not a responsibility. You know, the difference between your authority and your legitimacy. What would you say to those young people who are watching this Hope Forum today, that are in detention or on probation, that there are people that care about them and believe in them, and they should seek those people out because they're available and they could provide a lot of different good, positive choices for them?
First of all, that's an honor to even have an opportunity to do so. So I know there's a lot of teachers on this call, but at this very moment, I'm speaking to those beautiful babies who are joining us from the juvenile halls. I told my freedom riders again and again and again until they believed that doing a bad thing doesn't make you a bad person forever, that we can change and we can evolve if we so choose. And that's the beautiful gift that those freedom riders showed me, is that evolution, is that change. We did a toast for change, and it was taking those thoughts and feelings and putting them in the universe. So I want to tell your beautiful babies who are joining us, whatever you did then does not define you now. So the Freedom Riders have made an oath and have been doing so for 18 years, that every Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, we don't put on matching PJs, we don't put out cookies for Santa, we don't look at that chimney to see what treats have been put under our Christmas tree. Freedom Riders and I get up at the crack of dawn. Sometimes we'll drive 2 or 3, 4 hours, And we are Santa in a sleigh in my little Prius. And we go to juvenile halls. And we realize that sometimes the best days for some of us are the darkest days for others. So on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, we deliver hope. We dress in red. We bring brand new autographed copies of our book for people dressed in orange jumpsuits. We bring them cupcakes, we bring them hugs, and it's magical. And I want to tell you specifically about one such young person, because that one young person may be one of you sitting in a cell right now. This beautiful boy, his name was Calvin Glass III. It was Christmas Eve on this particular visit, and we brought our books. We brought these enormous cupcakes with all kinds of glitter and holiday fare. The warden trusted us because they didn't look at anything for a shank. We got in and we told stories and we laughed and we cried. And as each of these young people had to leave, the warden had them stand at attention in a line, and I just got anxious. I didn't want to say goodbye. So I said to these beautiful young boys, okay, fist bump, high five, hug, what's it going to be? But you can't get past me without an exchange, which makes me sad now when we're social distancing and we can't have those fist bumps, those high fives, and those hugs. So one by one, the boys did that fist bump, that high five, that hug. And the last boy was still sitting there, Calvin Glass III. And his cupcake was perfect. And every other boy that walked past me had, crumbs in the sides of their mouth, and they had devoured that cupcake. So I went up to him and I said, honey, why didn't you eat your cupcake? And he said, ma'am, it's just too damn perfect to touch. So I said, okay, what's it going to be? Fist bump, high five, hug. And he stopped and he went in for the hug. And it was awkward and it was clumsy and his hands were clammy and it lasted for the better part of forever. And in this moment I was doing this little dance and I thought, do I stop? I don't want to pull away too soon. And it was not a sexualized hug at all. It just lingered. And finally when he pulled back, I realized he was fighting back tears. Because when you're in a juvenile hall, you have a wall, you build up your front, you put up your dukes, and you swing first and you swing fast. And in that beautiful moment of vulnerability, this beautiful boy said, I'm sorry. And I said, no. I said, this is not a goodbye. Freedom Rider world, we don't believe in goodbyes. It's a ... It's a see you later. So write to me. Tell me your story, because everyone has a story. 3 days later, snail mail with a small little envelope with a stamp was a number and not a name. Calvin Glass III wrote his inmate number. I tore open that letter, and the first line of his letter was anything but hopeful. It said, I woke up today and I wanted to die. The second line of his letter was, so I looked around my cell for a way to die. And then the warden said to me, you have a visitor. And I thought, he's full of shit because no one ever visits me. I'm a foster kid. And he went on to explain that there was this crazy person pretending to be Santa, wearing a red dress, passing out cupcakes and books and hope. And then at the very end of his letter, he said, I want to apologize for that hug. It must have been weird, but I have never had a hug before. And I just didn't want it to end. So I think for all of those beautiful kids who are joining us today, that's what we are missing, is the closeness and the community and the ability to see people who need to be seen, to hear people who need to be heard, and to be able to look in the eyes of those beautiful babies and say, I see you and I believe in you. And you can stand on the shoulder of a giant like Calvin Glass III, because Calvin Glass III, he got out.
Yeah.
He didn't go back. And when you have hope and you can use your wings to fly, you can be like a homing pigeon, and you can go back and find those caring adults who believed in you and believe in yourself.
Yep.
So thank you, Rick, for letting them be a part of this really special podcast.
So, there's some wonderful people, and again, Erin would speak to them about freedom writer students and freedom writer teachers, and we use the term treasure hunters and hopeologists, but it's all the same. It's people who care about other people. And again, in Erin's book, Teaching Hope, where she has, again, a lot of remarkable stories about that, the thread that weaves its way through each and every one of those stories is about teaching hope. And how do you teach hope? The question is, because we believe hope is taught and learned. So the question then becomes, well, how do you teach hope? And it's pretty straightforward. You teach hope by first believing in the students that you're working with, the young people that you're working with, the kids who are on probation that you're working with. How do you teach them hope? You tell them you believe in them. It becomes sincere, it becomes poignant, it becomes powerful. The second way you teach hope, which I think is powerfully represented in Erin's life and the Freedom Riders' lives, is that you're there for them. You're not there to just service them, to provide them a service, to supervise them, to teach them a lesson, to help them with a particular skill set. You're there to care about them. You know, that powerful sense of relationships that kids know, as we would call those, one of the 4 ACEs, right? Of different types of relationships. So how do you teach hope? The first way is you believe in them. The second way is you connect with them. And the third way is you give them a sense of their future, and that they can control their own destiny, but they need to know where future is. And of course, we would outline future as 4 prominent destinations that we all know we'll be part of. And that is our home and family as we grow up, our education and career ambitions as we grow up, our service back to our community, that we're part of something larger than ourselves as we give back to our communities. And again, on Christmas Day, visiting the detention centers and providing a little cheer during some very dark moments. And of course, the last one is the ability to enjoy our leisure life, our hobbies and recreation. And what I think the underlying theme or thread that is being offered here, and Erin helped me through this thought process, is that hope is a choice. That when you get up in the morning, you can make a lot of choices for yourself. Some of those are good choices and some of those are bad choices, but they're all choices. We decide who we are, not where we are, but who we are at that point in time. And I think for the story you just shared with us, reminding that person who he was, and that there were people who believed, connected, and saw him achieving great things in his future. And a great thing doesn't mean $1 million check. A great thing that means that they're a contributing member of their family, that their family is better off because they're part of the family than they would have been if they weren't part of the family. What you did for your students and what you do now globally is that you offer choices. And I'd like you kind of to talk to us about how you see those choices being offered when teachers come to you for their trainings, for the institutes you run, for the presentations you make, that you're really giving them options to be more effective in reaching their students than they would have been if these options weren't available. And if you can kind of just walk us through that process.
Sure. Well, we the collective we mean our Freedom Rider family, was we realized the mantra that family for us was what we chose and what we made. So we became our brothers and sisters keepers. Some people have seen the film and there's this idea, oh, there was just a class. No, there was 150 Freedom Riders then and now. So I'm so honored that then we decided that we were a family. and we weren't going to cut the umbilical cord. I didn't realize those same students would be with me since 1994, and they are. They're still part of my everyday life. So as they grew and evolved from freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors at that precipice of graduating, and before we took that leap of faith into the real world where they were the first to graduate, the first to pursue higher education, we had to think of a different way to stay connected. So we started a foundation, and initially it was just a way to send them off to college. How do I help them pay for their tuition and their books? And so the Freedom Writer's Diary, which came out in 1999, was our opportunity to have scholarships. Freedom Writers wrote the book, and then those Freedom Writers got to become the scholarship participants. And then this crazy film was going to happen, and Hilary Swank was going to throw her hat in the ring. So we thought, given their druthers, people might watch the movie first and not even know there's a book. And the movie and the book is really a way to drive people to write their own story, to write what needs to be written and tell what needs to be told, which is our new mantra. So we decided to invite educators into our family fold, and we call them Freedom Writer teachers. And I love looking at the chat bar because a lot of our Freedom Writer teachers are actually joining us today. I saw Renee earlier and Valerie and a lot of our Freedom Writer teachers. We have 800 of them. They are in every state in America and a couple dozen countries. And we have come together in this communal family, and we serve the most vulnerable among us. And so what I want to do now is pivot away from me to them. And that's the collective them. All 500 of you on this call is right now, our kids are scared and uncertain. Their social emotional needs are not being met. Their mental health needs are being triggered. And that communal family that they needed in your classroom has been disrupted. And now they're hearing mom and dad arguing about how we're going to make rent. When is that stimulus package going to fall? Do we have enough electricity to plug in our computers? What do we do when we only have one computer per household? So kids at home don't have that luxury of having that free and reduced breakfast and or lunch that our schools in our country so graciously give. Don't have the ability for the teachers among us to smile and offer those handshakes, those fist bumps, and those hugs. So I'm imploring on each and every one of you to not lose the nuance of hope in your virtual classroom. Still see them, still hear them, still provide ways for them to communicate to you, and let you know that those fears are valid, that insecurity and anxiety is something that we all share, that we all feel, that we're all facing. Because I think what we need to do as both the educators and those that we are serving is to be honest, to be healthy, but to remain hopeful in these very trying times.
Wow, what a powerful message. What a dynamic message, because it's a call to action. So it's powerful when it's dynamic, and we would just frame it to support what Erin just said. We would just frame it as, how do you convey your belief in your students? What expressions do you use that the student feels that you're talking directly to them as well as their fellow students, but conveying the idea that you believe in them, that we're going to get through this together, that their concerns aren't much different than your concerns. We always say you can't have a kid at hope until you first have an adult at hope. And we put a lot of that burden on the adults because we're the adults. They're the kids. We have figured out how to get through the journeys in life. You know, we're survivors by nature. So we figured that how to survive in good times and bad times. This has been one of those really challenging times, but we've been through world wars, we've been through recessions, we've been through depressions. I can't only imagine what our grandparents and our great-grandparents went simply to survive. But we want to continue this ability to thrive. So how do you convey through this virtual world this very human relationship of believing in one another. How do you connect? So it's just not the formal relationship between teacher and student or probation officer and client. It's social worker and client. That human connection. How do you support the relationship side of it, not just the service side of it? And yeah, keep the brain busy thinking about the future. That's the gift that we were given as human beings, is that we're the only species that can think about its future and come up with plans to pursue those goals in the future and find the energy within ourselves to do that. Keep the brain busy, because the brain has to be busy, and it's either going to be busy on the negative side or it's going to be busy on the positive side. So let's plant all the seeds we can to ensure that that brain is busy thinking about the positive things, because it will wire itself to be positive. And if it allows itself to succumb to the negative things, it will wire itself to be negative. Let's come out of this together, being positive, making sure those neural networks are actually arranged to provide positivity to each of ourselves and to create that energy force necessary to continue to pursue our goals, even during this social distancing, quarantining, self-isolation part of it. Temporary at best, and the future is vast at best. So let's take advantage of the vastness. Erin, I have one more question for you, and then I want to open up to Q&A.
Okay. Can I before you say that, I want to respond, because I sometimes I'm just nodding. I don't know when to pivot, but I think this is really important to say. For a lot of us, when we went to college, regardless of our age, technology was not the staple. There was, the chalkboard, then it was the whiteboard, and we have our minions at our class. Our kids are always the ones that are setting up the technology for us. And now that we're all at home and trying to make that connection, it's terrifying. We were testing prior to everybody joining this Zoom. My fabulous Freedom Rider team does the same. And I found myself, the first time we did our first Google Hangout, the first time we did our first Zoom, the first time we did our first Facebook Live, I was anxious on all of those platforms, because that's not how I usually communicate. I communicate face to face. And I found myself, when I started seeing them and reading the thread and seeing the emojis pop, I was so overcome that I literally just started sobbing, uncontrollably, like the snotty kind of snob. And in my vulnerability of that moment and being so overcome, my instinct was to be embarrassed. I'm not being very professional and I'm not being very teacherly. But I think the duality that we all need to know on this call is we can be both teacher and student. And so in that moment, with my vulnerability exposed to everyone in Google Hangout and Zoom and Facebook Live, is suddenly we all took a breath and we all started admitting our own insecurities and our own fears and our own snotty nose crying. And I think that it's okay for us, as we adapt to this new normal that is anything but normal, to be able to say, this scares me too. And can you hear me? And am I looking at the right place? And all of those things that make us feel less than. Because we are going to feel less than in this pivot, in this adaptation.
Yeah.
And if we can allow our kids at home to be the teacher for us, to be our cheerleader, to be the person that is hopeful for us, it allows that duality to continue of student and teacher. They say that wonderful cliche that when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to be the student, and I needed teachers to arrive for me. So I hope on this call, where we have both students and teachers, that we can admit our imposter complexes together. We can admit our insecurities about when this will be over together. We can admit how do we do this? What button do we push? What is our bandwidth on our Wi-Fi? All of those things, because it's still not normal. And I think that the more we can admit that and be transparent to those that we are humbly serving, I think that will serve us well.
Yeah, and recognizing that this is temporary, and that the future is vast, right? So let's not get caught up in the here and now. Let's not wallow in the here and now. Let's do what we're supposed to do, be safe, stay healthy, be vigilant. But let's let our brains continue to do what it does, and that's to imagine a world that we can control. And we've always done that. And so that becomes important. And then to all the child welfare workers that are watching us today, or all the probation, juvenile justice people who are watching us today, all the educators, all the community-based organizations, anyone that's involved with kids and parents, is that, yes, you will be a better parent because of your children. You will be a better teacher because of your students. You'll be a better probation officer because of your probationers, right? You'll be a better child welfare worker because of the young people who are under your care during some difficult times. You will be the student, and you will grow because they will help you grow if you just listen to them. And I think that message is powerful.
Can I also interject for a moment? I think this is one of my lessons I learned is in our curriculum, in our mandates, oftentimes there is this feeling you have to teach to a test, a score, a statistic. Now is the time that we teach to a student, every student. And what I mean by that is that we need to pause. Yes, the curriculum will come. Yes, there can be that quiz or that test down the road, but before there is the data, we got to go to where the students are at. Acknowledge the uncertainty, acknowledge the anxiety, allow them to have a forum to discuss their fears, their insecurities, all of that, because mental health is real. And I think what's really important for all of us in this caring environment is to allow a platform for someone to say, today I'm scared. Today I'm anxious. My parents are making decisions that are going to affect me, and it's going to affect what we eat, where we sleep, what we do, who we are. And for a lot of kids, they go to school to escape that reality, to escape the banter, the fighting, the reality that there's not food in that fridge, the reality that mom doesn't have the bandwidth to send them to school with that little brown paper bag filled with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So school provided for so many kids the ability to eat, to socialize, to feel included, to feel special. And I just don't want us to lose sight of that now that they're home, because we can't give them the sandwiches they need, but we can nourish their soul. And we might not be able to give them that smile as they're walking through our door, but we could send them an emoji. We could send them words that lift them up. So I think it's really important for us now to really fixate on the nuances,
right?
The small acts of kindness, the ability for us to check in with them and ask very simplistic questions that are anything but simple, because we need to make them feel safe before they can take that test, before they read that chapter. And I think that's what we in this collective community are doing today, is acknowledging that they are feeling at risk so that we can transition and be the bridge back to being at hope.
And that's what we do best as adults, as people who care about young people. We allow them to see themselves at hope, not at risk. We do it from what you just said. We make them feel physically safe when they're with us, emotionally safe when they're with us, and intellectually safe when they're with us. That becomes part of who we are as human beings. And I always brag to others that I know Erin Gruwell. And I said, one of the things that I enjoy in our relationship, and you will see it if, Erin and I are with you, or you invite Erin to join you at one of your events. She is the best hugger on the globe, right? Mm-hmm. But that best hugger, the first thing she'll do, whether she knows you or not, you'll get a hug. But in that hug, you'll feel physically safe, you'll feel emotionally safe, and you'll feel intellectually safe. How she's able to convey that level of magic, I don't know, but that's the special gift that she gives to each and every one of us. Erin, I have to believe there are a million questions out there. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, Kim, if we can ask you to kind of pipe in. Kim, as you all know, is the right-hand person at Kids at Hope and the Center for the Advanced Study and Practice of Hope, and make sure all these things happen well. Kim, if you can help moderate some of the Q&A that are some of the questions that came in, and Erin and I will fill the answers to those as best we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Kim.
Okay. Hi, Erin. Hi, Rick. Hi, everybody. So happy to have everybody here. Can I just give a quick shout out to the states that we have, that I heard from represented? New York, Maryland, Ohio, Illinois, Tennessee, Arizona, Washington, Oregon, Wisconsin, Colorado, Texas, Iowa, Montana, and Canada. We had about 468 people joining us.
Oh, and also Crystal Russell's joining us from Ohio.
Yes, that was Crystal that I heard from. So thank you all for joining us. In Michigan, I'm hearing California, New Mexico. So yes, we have a million questions, so let's get to as many as we can. Marvi in Prescott, Arizona says she is watching with her students at juvenile detention students in Prescott. This is awesome. Sorry, my dog's gonna bark. I have a student that asked the question, so one of her students asked this question, does hope always lead to a positive outcome? Do you have to act on hope, or is it enough on its own?
Ooh, I'll take that first, and then you could finish it, Rick. I think that for my students, as Rick said, they knew a lot of four-letter words that were not hope. And they're very colorful four-letter words, which I'm sure those of you have heard in the juvenile hall. But once they discovered hope, and home, also a four-letter word, that became our go-to, our safe place. And we had to be vigilant and remind ourselves. We had to constantly nurture each and every one of us, because when my students would leave that hopeful room 203, our home, they would go home to a house of chaos, to streets where they were dangerous, to relationships and friends who often pulled them down rather than lift to rise. So I think for you, what you need to do is find hopeful people who model what hope looks like, who can smile and offer those wonderful gestures and make recommendations and give compliments without even being solicited. So I think hope needs to be nurtured. We water that beautiful flower so it can grow, or as Tupac said, that rose in concrete. Each and every one of us needs to nurture that hope, to take care of that hope, and then pay it forward to someone else who needs it more than we do.
I think I would underscore what Erin just said. I would offer to amplify her words and her passion, that hope requires action. There's a difference between hope and optimism. Optimism is a positive way of thinking, but hope is a positive way of acting. So to be a hopeful person, you have to show some commitment to what your goals are. You have to identify what you want to achieve. You have to outline how you're going to get from point A to point B. And then you have to say, how much of myself am I committed to achieving the goals that I set up? Because a lot of people have high expectations for themselves, but low in terms of energy to pursue it. You know, I want to pursue this, but I want to sleep until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It doesn't work that way. So to be hopeful, you have to have goals, pathways, and gas in your own gas tank. But to have a rosy outlook in life, that's what we would call optimism. The combination of having positive thoughts and positive action is the best of all worlds. So if you can find that balance in your life, have a way of thinking positively and a way of acting positively, boy, you've probably solved about 80% of life's secrets. So continue to pursue that, because that's a skill. We can think about lots of things, negative things, positive things, be able to lean towards the positive at the conscious level, and you'll find your brain responding accordingly. Kim?
Thank you. My next question comes from Lee, and Lee asks, after you modeled that connections and high expectations can change classroom culture and most importantly, students' lives, how did that modeling transform the way your colleagues responded to their own students?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think a lot of people who have seen the movie, they know that character Margaret. And Margaret was actually an amalgam of a lot of those toxic teachers in that teacher's lounge, the naysayers, the folks who say those and them rather than kids at hope. So what I realized is I did not go into education to wear the Miss Congeniality sash in that teacher's lounge. So I spent a lot of time in isolation in my room with my students. And together we were stronger. Together we were mightier. And so what I realized is I needed to go out and seek people who thought like I did, embrace kids, and create that communal network that I so desperately needed. And that's why I'm so thrilled to be a fan of Kids at Hope, to have 800 Freedom Rider teachers, and to still have those 150 Freedom Riders who started this journey with me all those years ago. Because when you find hopeful people, it does lift us up. When you find hopeful people, they'll walk you off that ledge. They'll be there for you and the light in the darkest of days for ourselves. So what I realized is that I went into teaching for those kids, not for those teachers. And I had amazing colleagues. I did have some difficult ones. And I'm just glad that after the film came out, that those difficult teachers are no longer at Wilson High School, because they were doing kids a disservice. And that's a sad thing. I think everyone should love this profession. Everyone should embrace those that we humbly serve. And the fact that those teachers were not and were so hypercritical of the Freedom Riders and their newfound success was really a tragedy.
Kim, other questions? Hey,
yes. Tanya's asking a question that I think that will apply to a lot of us in this situation, trying to juggle your career. She's a juvenile probation officer, concerned about those kids, concerned about her own kids at home, now having to homeschool their children, being a mom, a wife, a friend, a daughter, etc. What advice do you have in trying to manage all of this at the same time right now?
Oh my gosh, that's a question I still
you can handle that one.
Honest. And as Rick knows, when our book first came out, I was invited to all 50 states, and I brought Freedom Riders with me, and we would meet students. And before we took off on every flight, out came the flight attendant, and she or he would do the safety rules about the mask. And the mask was always about take the oxygen mask and breathe first and foremost, and then put it on the kid sitting beside you. And I often say that we as educators, we don't do that. We do the exact opposite. We give the oxygen mask to our students, to our family, to our friends, and we forget to breathe. We forget to have balance. We wear so many hats: mother, friend, cheerleader, counselor, comrade, you name it. And balance is something that I have really struggled with, to figure out how can I be all things to all people. And I realized I can't. So what I did is I started going to counseling myself. I journaled myself, and I started having boundaries, which was hard for me because boundaries are not in my bandwidth. But I realized that I have to breathe first and foremost before I allow others to breathe. And so I think that's a great piece of advice, to have something that lifts you up. For me, it was that wonderful, subjective counselor who could allow me for an hour to vent if I needed to, or to cry if I needed to have a network of friends who were positive and hopeful, to find that sacred space like a journal, to write about everything that was troubling me or wonderful. And I think that we've got to work on having boundaries, tough love, and learning to say no. That was something I really struggled with, is how do I say no and do it lovingly? How do I say no without hurting someone's feelings? And I think we are the teachers who volunteer for everything. We burn the candle at both ends. We take everything home with us. And now we are literally at home, and we are overworked, overburdened, and clearly underpaid. So it's really important for all of us to find outlets and the ability to breathe.
I think I would find that insight just remarkable. And again, I like to overuse the word dynamic because it requires a level of action. I would add to that, come up with 2 lists each day. One is your to-do list. We know what that looks like. That's never ending, the to-do list. We're very good at doing things, so that's the to-do list. But there's a separate list that you need to come up with, and that's the to-be list. And what is that? What's on the to-be list? And the to-be list is to be kind. And on the to-be list is to be loving. And on the to-do list is to-be list is to be creative. So look at what you want to be, not only what you want to do. Find those 2 lists and find, as Erin suggested, the balance of what to do and who to be while you're doing that. I think you'll find yourself finding that unique balance, which I think we all struggle with in all of our lives. None of us are free from the anxiety and the sadness and the depression and the creativity and the imagination. We all have the full range of human emotions. It's how we manage those and how we allow ourselves to make positive choices, not allow those situations to overwhelm us, to be proactive in your own life, because as good as you will be in your life, is you will be that much better for people who need you. Kim, we may have time for a couple more questions.
A couple more. Are you good, Erin?
I'm absolutely.
Okay.
She can go for days. I'm the one that's going to get fired here.
Carly is also watching with some youth in a juvenile detention center, and here's a question that they had. What made you teach and change these kids if you've never been through what they had been through? How did you understand their situation?
Oh, what a great question.
Beautiful question. I think that for a lot of us as educators, especially those that had the foresight of inviting the youth today, is we are empaths. And what that means is when you're an empath is you have compassion. You feel and feel deeply. You take those that are struggling and you feel that angst and that anger, and you want to help. You want to find solutions. And so even though I did not go through some of the things that my students went through personally, being evicted, homelessness, abuse, trouble with the law, or searching for self, what was important for me to do was sometimes just to listen, just to be that shoulder to lean on, to wipe away a tear or shed one myself. So I think what I did is I went into that classroom with this toolkit of things about how do I make words sing and leap out of the pages of a book. But before those words could leap out of the pages of a book, I needed to teach my students they were storytellers. They were truth tellers. You can write that story. You can tell that story. I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to give you as much credence as Shakespeare or that sage. And so very quickly, I started to adapt and morph and become their student. I got to learn from them every single day. In fact, I'm still learning from them every single day. So even though our backgrounds were not exactly the same, I learned through empathy to understand who they were, see them, and celebrate them.
Maybe, Erin, I'll put you on the spot, but not really, but yes, really. Maybe we'll come back, because we're never going to have enough time to cover all the questions, and these are profound questions with deep-seated understandings of life's conditions and challenges. But wouldn't it be great at a later date that we can come back, maybe host one of these events just for young people, particularly young people who are looking for better choices for themselves? Because when they make a better choice for themselves, they're making a better choice for their friends. They're making a better choice for their families. They're making a better choice for the community. And all they need to know is that they can control those choices. I think having a robust conversation about that, and to recognize that in some cases, those who are serving them don't have the same challenges that they perceive they have, but to recognize we all have challenges. And some of those are deep challenges, and some of those are hidden in our psyche that maybe we're not comfortable sharing it with everyone, but those are demons that live within us too. And it has nothing to do with our social economic status. It has everything to do with our emotional and mental status. So it's just not the conditions from which we come, but it's the understandings and the shared human experience of anxiety and depression and joy and optimism and pessimism and all of these constant emotions that we're wrestling with every single day. So we need to find a way to do this together and invite some more young people to the discussion, because there's no way we can do it in one forum. But Kim, that being said, there's someone out there that has the last question of the day.
Okay, last question of the day is Brian. He's a middle school teacher in Two Rivers, Wisconsin. He teaches 7th grade. And he says one of the greatest fears of students and adults as well is failure, because failure makes them stand out, and ultimately the fear of not fitting in. Shutting down is a way of coping with this and is at times a safe place to be. What advice can you give to teachers for working with these students?
Ooh. We have to change what failure means. I think for a lot of kids who've been told they are dumb or stupid or nothing, they believe it. And words can stick and sting and stay with us. So I had 150 kids who believed they were failures because some adult told them so. And I wanted them to believe they were brilliant and beautiful and could go anywhere and do anything. And that failure was part of just taking a risk. And that sometimes when we fall, not if, but when we fall, let's fall forward. Let's create a community that will catch us. Let's take away those words like right and wrong and be able to take those risks. It's okay to stand out. It's okay to be different. It's okay to live your authentic self. And I think for a lot of kids, they feel that they're the misfit. They're the kid that's marginalized or in the corner. And those are the kids that I embrace. Come one, come all, shape, size, color, and hue. So I think it's really important to take those words and to pivot. That rights and wrongs, failures and winners are not part of our vernacular as we go through this educational journey. Allow our kids to fall, but pick them up. Allow our kids to be different and to be celebrated. Allow our kids to fit in rather than be pushed aside, and rather than having them be the first one picked on and the last one picked. Pick them first and foremost.
Yeah. If you're not failing, you're not trying. If you're not failing, you're not trying. And this idea of being intellectually safe, I think, which is part of the core of the question. How do you make sure all your students feel intellectually safe? And if we created a system where you can only raise your hand when you feel you have the right answer, is not an intellectually safe system, not an intellectually safe educational system. Kids should be encouraged to raise their hands because they want to be seen. They want to be heard. It doesn't matter if they have the right answer. It matters that they have something to say. And so when a question's asked, just don't choose the person who raises their hand. Involve everybody in it, because that creates an intellectually safe environment. And that's true for across the sector. So to all our friends out there, to all the freedom writers out there, to all the treasure hunters and hopeologists, on behalf of Erin Gruwell, America's Teacher, Kids at Hope, and the Arizona State University Center for the Advanced Study and Practice of Hope, to the child welfare workers, the juvenile justice system workers, to all the educators and all the people in youth serving business and parents. Thank you for taking the time out of your challenging schedules during challenging times to spend a few moments with us. This Hope Forum is recorded. We'll make sure that you all get a link to it if you want to share it with others. We look forward to hosting you and again, in subsequent forums that will be happening for the next few Wednesdays, always at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Erin, from the bottom of our collective hearts, for the time you spent with us, for the time you spend with me personally and Kids of Hope in terms of helping us advance our mission. We're here for you and the Freedom Riders. We love you dearly. Stay as socially close to us as you can, because we know we're emotionally close and intellectually close on what we're trying to achieve together.
And I want to say thank you. When we discussed doing this, it kind of spurred the Freedom Rider family into action. And as you said, no exceptions, and it's hope is doing. So our Freedom Rider family, we've rallied, and we're trying to create hopeful things for the universe, whether it's the podcast that you and Antoine were on with me, or curriculum that speaks to kids' social emotional needs. So we're doing our small part to help our teacher brethren. And I'm just so honored to have an opportunity to be part of this Hope Forum. So thank you.
Keep your seatbelts fastened. You're all traveling at the speed of hope. Take good care. Love you all. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.